What up, you stoners? You guys are tuned in to another episode of the Business is Blooming podcast. I got the homie Ben all the way from California.
The
Yo, today we're going to talk about top challenges that business face trying to obtain licensing, all the way to diversity and inclusion in the industry. So, Ben, what's going on?
Not much, man. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Most definitely, man. I'm excited to have you, brother. You're going to speak about
Excited to be
a
here.
lot of knowledge that I don't have, so I'm excited to learn from you today as well with our listeners. So,
I'm sure I'll be learning a thing or two from you as well, man.
no doubt, no doubt. All right, man. So, I guess let's talk about your background in the industry, man. Talk about how did you get started with cannabis?
Sure. Okay. So at least getting started with cannabis, I started, I tried weed for the first time, in like my freshman year in high school. Wouldn't necessarily encourage that for, the kids out there, but, that was when I started. Um, And yeah, I mean, I didn't immediately take to it, but by the time I was getting ready for college, I was out in Massachusetts, and at that point in time, I think maybe weed had been decriminalized, but it certainly wasn't like legal, and I knew it was medical in California, and I always thought that was pretty cool. So I went to school in Western Mass, a school called Hampshire. And when I was there, Massachusetts legalized the medical use in like, what year was that? 2012, I think. Um, and yeah, I used that as an opportunity to start like studying cannabis in like an academic sense, particularly with regard to the development of the medical program in Massachusetts. That was the way I was able to like frame it to my professors, like as a means of like, studying it. So yeah, I
Man, that's
studied
dope.
the development of the regulations in Mass, and that has kind of carried me through to this day. Currently, work as a like, well, I guess I'm a consultant, but primarily with regard to compliance with cannabis rules and regulations, as well as you mentioned like licensing. So I'm not like a lawyer or anything like that. I just work specifically with like cannabis businesses, but like all types of cannabis businesses, like retail. Retail is what I've primarily worked with. But I've worked with grows. I've worked with manufacturers to a lesser extent. And I mean, I used to like press rosin and stuff like that. I used to grow myself. I mean, I technically have like two plants growing, but like they're kind of babies and they're outside, so I don't give them as much
Yeah,
attention as
no
they
doubt.
deserve. But yeah, so I've been working in weed. I mean, I think it's almost 10 years now. Yeah, I worked at a dispensary in Massachusetts in 2015, I think it was, and then I moved out to
Okay.
California. Worked at a dispensary in LA in 2016 was when I started working there. And yeah, I've just been working in weed ever since.
Man, so dude, that's quite an extensive time in the weed, and for you to be able to study it at UMass, bro, and
Mm-hmm.
explain it to your professors why it makes sense to, because I totally understand trying to explain to us a quote unquote superior or someone
Right.
above
Yeah.
you why you should study cannabis. Because when I
Yeah.
had my CDB in the military, I brought up the same thing that's what I wanted to look into
Mm-hmm.
as life after the Navy, and they didn't see the plan. So I'm kind of glad you
Yeah.
stuck with it too, man.
No, thank you. Yeah. Even there, in a college setting, like they don't take it seriously. I mean, they think of weed and they think of like stoners. They think of the students just like smoking weed and like not doing their assignments and shit like that. Thankfully, I did have at least one professor that was he kind of saw the vision. He was more of like, actually, there were two professors. Both were like agricultural professors. One taught botany, and he was my like advisor at Hampshire. His name was Larry,
Nice.
Larry Winship. Shout out him. Um, the
Shout out
other
Larry.
professor, yeah, he was a good dude. He really was. the one that allowed me to do the project. The other professor was
Nice.
at UMass. I don't his name was Lyle Craker, kind of a crazy name. But he was really cool because he used to like petition the DEA, like the Drug Enforcement Agency, to allow him to cultivate cannabis at UMass for like
Nice.
research purposes, but they never allowed him to do it. They always, every time he like applied for it, they always denied it, and it was a thing for him. It was like a point of like activism for him, for like he did it for like probably like 20 years.
Man, respect. Respect. So let me ask you a question. So what are the top challenges businesses face when trying to get licensing in cannabis?
It's a great question. It definitely depends on the type of business that you're doing, the location, like the state that you're trying to do it, the city that you're trying to do it. But like by and large, the most common issue is like capital, having enough money. Like by far is like, do you have enough money to be able to do this? And then kind of
Right.
going hand in hand with that is like the property that you're looking to operate your business in. If you own the property or lease the property, or if you can even find it at all, because that can, of course, come with its own like huge bill associated with it. If you're like building out a new building or retrofitting an old building, it's all like super expensive to even do that, and you have to do that
Right.
in order to get a license. But for other businesses, like for instance, a dispensary, um, sometimes licenses are limited, like they're restricted. So in certain cities and even in certain states, like they don't just like give you a license if you apply for it. Sometimes they're competitive, and you have to compete against other businesses. Like for instance, there's a city in LA County. A lot of people know Pasadena. Um, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they're limited to either, it was something either 3 or 6 licenses, something like that. So, and the whole
Hmm.
city of like over 100,000 people, I think. Here, let me see how many people are even there. Uh, yeah, there's a
So
hundred
while
hundred
you look for
thousand
that,
people there.
bro,
Yeah, yeah. Go
wow,
ahead.
what what do businesses do to set themselves apart if they're not vertically integrated and all they're doing is selling the biomass? What are they doing to set themselves apart?
So, yeah, I mean that's a another very relevant question, like especially for like cultivators. I guess every business, a dispensary or a cultivator or like a extraction business manufacturer, needs to figure out a way to set themselves apart. But for like a cultivator, I actually saw a pretty interesting like TikTok, or it wasn't TikTok, it was Instagram reel of a this guy who's in the LA cannabis industry. He works for High Times. His name is John Capetta. I don't know him, but I saw his opinion on it, and I thought it was a pretty interesting summary of what sets like a cultivator apart. Because, like you just said, with like biomass, the general trend with that is like weed, like pounds at wholesale, are just like getting cheaper and cheaper. Um, I know with like the
Right.
big outdoor grows, they're probably selling pounds for like, they're probably shooting to get like $500, like if that. Maybe some of them go as low as like 400 or less. Um, and for biomass, probably even cheaper. But what this guy was saying was that you're seeing the people who are setting themselves apart in the market are those that are truly focusing on like small batch cultivation and like releases. So like kind of like what's the word for it? Like artisan, like boutique,
Mm.
like for instance your like,
Craft.
yeah, craft, exactly. Like things that like you can only get from that grower, and they only have a limited amount of it, and like it's super like fire. Like, quality
Right. Right.
definitely
For sure.
sets, kind of speaks for itself. It commands a higher price point, and not even just that, like people want it. And so that can be the case for like an indoor grow, even an outdoor grow. Speaking from my
Mm-hmm.
own like taste, there's a strain that's really popular right now in California. It's called White Thorn Rose, and it's primarily from like one farm up in I think it's in Humboldt. I'm not sure exactly where it is. Um, and it's called Huckleberry Hill Farms. Uh, and as far as I know, they're like the main one that grows it. And it's like outdoor, like I think, they probably do hoop house or whatever. So it doesn't even have to be indoor, to get that,
Mm-hmm.
appeal. But definitely, you kind of have to offer something that no one else is offering. There's probably 100
Right.
or 1,000 farms that are offering biomass, and they're all just at that point, you could source it from whoever you want, and at that point, it's really just like what the price is, and of course the quality to go along with that. Um, so yeah, that's
For
one
sure.
element. When it comes to a dispensary,
You know,
that's tough. I mean, I don't know if you want. I could go
because
down
I feel
that
like
route.
I feel like at that point, if all you're offering is flower and you're not cultivating it, you're just the place where it's dispensed.
Right, right.
It has to be about a money grab. Who's willing to pay the most money to get the capital in which they see they are,
Yeah,
almost destined to get. So
yeah. I know what
in
you
my
mean.
opinion.
Yeah, and that's what's
And then,
interesting
like I
about.
said on the other show too,
Yeah,
with that, it's like it's a race for who can have the biggest biomass, the best biomass,
right.
the prettiest, but sell it for the cheapest.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's a race to the bottom.
Yeah. There's a big farm out here called Glass House that has definitely they don't have the best reputation in terms of like the economics behind it, as well as like the kind of political climate around it. Um, they kind of represent like big tech, former cops and stuff like that are. I mean, they're
Oh
publicly
wow!
traded. They're publicly traded in Canada, and they have probably. I mean, they have millions, if not hundreds of millions, if not even more than that, in terms of like financing. And so, a small grower up in Humboldt or even in LA, like an indoor grower in LA, like they look at that, you can't really blame them for getting upset. It's like, how do you compete with someone whose business model is exactly what you described, like the
Right,
most that they can grow for the lowest cost of production, but of course also still maintaining like a level of quality that like the market is looking for. But yeah, I mean, an indoor
right,
grower ultimately, like, if you're growing even in like a 10,000 square foot warehouse, like that's huge, but these guys have millions of square feet. Like it's a whole nother
right,
level.
right. So let's. How do licensing processes differ from state to state? For instance, my state, Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
we're only medical.
Mm-hmm.
Where in California, I think you guys are medical and rec, or is
Mm-hmm.
it just solely rec?
It's medical and rec. Something that you're kind of seeing. There's not like an official policy or anything like that, but a lot of states, once they go rec, they kind of just focus on rec. Like the medical program gets kind of like absorbed by the rec program. Um, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, the difference between the two is usually pretty significant. Um, it usually is significantly like higher threshold in terms of like what you need to operate a business from like a regulatory standpoint. Like the state government, like the agency, usually is a bit more uh, strict about things for a medical program, be it like the number of businesses that are allowed, or I mean, how even someone like a patient even gets access to weed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if it's medical, for the most part, it's pretty strict. Like you have to get like some sort of like certification from like a doc, or rather a recommendation from a doctor. You have to go get like in some states you have to get like a patient ID, and then obviously you can only go to like these certain businesses. In like Rhode Island, for instance, um, they for a while up until pretty recently they only had like a couple dispensaries that were like permitted by the state, like literally like two. Obviously, it's a very small state, but still, I mean, two
But
dispensaries. Like,
still, yeah,
imagine if there were two grocery stores. Like, it's
right.
like you can't even imagine that.
It's no
Um,
access to medicine, really.
yeah, and others. And I mean, things have changed there recently. As far as I know, they're adult use now. But in other states, even now, like I've worked with a group that is opening a dispensary in Ohio. It's kind of the same situation. Thankfully, the Board of Pharmacy is a lot more. They've at least allowed dispensaries to open. There's something like 100
Hmm.
plus in Ohio now, but they're all medical. They're all like very, very highly regulated. Everything needs to be done like exactly according to the rules at all times. And I mean, that's the case everywhere, but like, they have a lot of rules to follow, whereas other states might not have as many rules. Like, actually, one example
Right.
too is I think it's Minnesota. Um, they recently now allow for like you can literally sell like certain cannabis products in a grocery store. I saw a picture of it just the other
Nice.
day. Yeah, I mean,
Nice.
and I think it's medical only. I'm gonna quickly search it.
No,
Um,
go ahead.
no, Minnesota allows adult use, so that was recent as of this year too, as of August of this year. But same thing, even though it's not medical only anymore. Um, Now instead of dispensaries, they can just sell it kind of like wherever. So on a state by state basis, be it medical, be it adult use, they all look pretty different. And in terms of like the licensing side of things, it can really change what it looks like for each business. Like I was just mentioning Ohio, that goes through the Board of Pharmacy, and in a couple months, it's actually going to go through the
Here,
Department of Commerce. In California, it's the Department of Cannabis Control. So like, there's all different regulatory bodies, all different processes.
here in Virginia, I think all they did was took the law written for alcohol and just replaced alcohol with cannabis. So it really doesn't really flow well, like,
Interesting.
and but I do know it's only medical, but I don't see a clear cut way still how to get involved. Even because, well, so I asked at the dispensary and they said that you have to be a pharmacist or go to pharmacy
Hmm.
school to be a bud tender, right? But they don't talk
Damn.
about the growers. They don't talk about how to get inside or maybe even get the right licensing in order to run
Uh-huh.
my own vertically integrated store, So it's kind of hush hush. Like, where would you find that type of information?
Oh, sorry. Your camera cut off for a second. I didn't hear the last part of your question.
So, well, where would a person like me find that type of information?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, that's interesting for Virginia in terms of like the pharmacist stuff. I think that's the case in like Pennsylvania too, that they have to have like a pharmacist on like on staff. Um, Yeah, I mean, when it
No,
comes
the
to
bud
like,
tenders are pharmacists.
oh wait, sorry, your camera. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, that's crazy. I actually wasn't familiar with that for there or anywhere else, but if for someone that isn't a pharmacist and you're looking for ways to get involved, I mean, that is one of the toughest parts, like getting a foot in the door. Usually in states like here, the foot in the door is being a bud tender. That's how you can, it's usually the easiest. I don't want to say easy, but it's like the simplest job to get in terms of like, you don't need to have like
Right.
crazy credentials. You can be like, 21 years old and like
Or
apply
trimmer.
for it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or on the cultivation side, trimmer for sure. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to like a specific job, like, a lot of them post on like Indeed, or other like job listings like that. But if you wanted to get more,
Really?
yeah, absolutely. That's where I got. I think that's where I got not my first dispensary job in Mass, but my first dispensary job in California. I got from Craigslist, and then I got another job from Indeed like a year later. Um, But even beyond that, you could also look into like specific companies if that was something you were interested in. Like, for instance, if you knew that there was a grow like close by, like your apartment or your house or wherever, um, you could look into them specifically, like
You
find their
blanked out,
contact
man. I don't
information.
know.
A lot of that because they're like licensed by the state or the city. A
I
lot of
don't know
that
why it
info
does
is
this,
like
bro.
somewhat
It's
public.
so annoying.
You might have to do a bit of research to find it, but yeah, that's another way if you want to get a little bit more direct. Sorry, your camera is frozen, so if you're saying anything, I cannot hear you. I think we lost him, folks.
You still there, bro?
I'm gonna text him.
So, are there any unique challenges in the cannabis industry that newcomers often overlook?
I mean, the capital again is the first thing that comes to mind. Um, but the reason that is a little different because weed is still illegal federally. Um, you can't really access money or even use banks in like normal ways. Um, the reason for that, I guess, can get a little complicated in terms of like why that is. But yeah, I mean, that's, in my opinion, probably the biggest like curveball for any people looking to like start a business or like invest in a business. Like, you can't just like go to the bank and get a loan like you can with like
Right,
any other business. Um, they will not. I mean, some banks will. Some banks will serve cannabis businesses, but generally speaking, like any big bank won't. Um,
right.
some small banks do, like credit unions and stuff like that, but even then, like your terms aren't going to be as favorable.
Well, see, this is my thing, though, right? So, I don't know. People aren't walking up to the inspectors and the Congress people that that approve the licensing, right, and handing them a wad of cash, right? Every so
Pretty much.
so where's this money going? And like, because at the end of
Right.
the day, I know it's ended up in the bank, so it just makes
Right.
no
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly. That's
frustrating.
like it's like it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I mean, there are banks that do bank cannabis businesses, but um, the way that I've understood it is that like these, if you're, I mean, it's one thing if you're giving money to like a government entity, like when you pay your license fee to like the Department of Cannabis Control, like yeah, you give the agency money and then they put it in their bank accounts, and they have bank accounts because they're like a government agency. They're not impacted like a cannabis business. But from what I understood, and it's probably, it's ever changing, but like it it's a weird process. Like these businesses, they have a, like they get like a dispensary, for instance, their customers generally pay in cash, and then they like collect the cash in like a safe or a vault at the dispensary, and then they have a cash pickup company come in and transport the cash to a like local branch of like the Federal Reserve. And I don't know the exact specifics of it, but like for some reason you're able to like deposit that money into the Federal Reserve Bank, and then it gets like credited to your bank account. Um, I don't know why that's the way, but as far as I recall from like other businesses, like that's how they did it, and it's like legal. There's like, it's not like a workaround or anything like that. Um, but again, some banks do serve cannabis businesses now. So I think they probably have a bit more of a normal relationship, but you still can't
But I don't
legally
think
take
those
like credit
banks
cards.
are FDIC, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it probably depends on the specific bank, but yeah, I think that is a factor into them as well because of their size, I guess. I'm not
It's
super
crazy.
knowledgeable about the financial system, but yeah, I think that's an accurate statement about FDIC.
How can the cannabis industry better support veterans looking to get involved?
I missed the first part of your question. Sorry, the audio cut out.
How can the cannabis industry better support veterans looking to get into the industry?
Well, I'm not a veteran myself, but I do know, I know one person in particular, Eric Gopel. Hopefully I'm saying his last name right. Gopel. Shout out Eric. Um, I think he's actually on his honeymoon right now, but he is a,
Oh man,
army,
congratulations!
yeah, he's an army veteran that, is, super outspoken about, veterans' involvement in the cannabis industry, ways that the industry can benefit veterans, vice versa, and probably more importantly is how the government can support, or rather, the military can support veterans and cannabis. I mean, you said yourself, when you brought it up during your like service or the end of your service, that they just said working with weed
It's
like
not a
wasn't a
good
good idea.
plan,
Right, yeah. I mean,
right?
obviously, because of federal laws, like it doesn't surprise me that they said that. But I have another friend that works for the VA, and he kind of echoes a lot. Or no, let me take a step back. He does not work for the VA. He used to work for the VA, and I don't know if he was like directly employed by them or if he was like, I don't know what the exact employment dynamic was, but
Contracted, yeah.
yeah, he may have been contracted. Um, he is like a psychologist, and yeah, I mean, he would say the same things, like wanting the VA to like, they hand out like opiate prescriptions, like it's nothing, or other similar drugs or painkillers, and so many of them could be at least like, maybe not replaced. I mean, for the most part replaced, but like in some cases, just like it could be, they could use a cannabis product or a cannabis related
They should
product
have
to
a
like help.
branch.
Mm,
No, for sure, they should have a branch, dedicated to veterans who use cannabis. I brought it up in one of my VA doctor visits, and he completely dismissed it. Completely said that
sorry, man, your
he
audio is
has had
cutting out. I
studies to
cannot hear what you're
show.
saying.
Oh my goodness! What about now? Any better?
Now, yeah, I can hear you now. I didn't hear what you said
Maybe it's
though.
because I'm moving. So I was saying that I've had VA doctors that I brought up cannabis to and how it helped my pain,
Mm,
and he literally told me there's no studies to show that, and that he
wow.
has studies that shows against it. And I asked, okay, well, if you have studies, I believe that you should show me where these studies are, because I
Mm-hmm.
can show you where I went to school and we have studies that say differently.
Right.
So, as a doctor and a patient relationship, I would love to discuss this with you. And he was completely put off with it. And luckily,
Wow.
I wasn't in the military at the time, so I can speak my mind. I could just
Mm-hmm.
tell him that, I don't think you and I are a good fit, with each other.
Yeah, for real. Uh, that's crazy. What was I gonna say? I forgot what I was gonna say, but yeah, I mean, to at least the question regarding, how can the industry better support veterans, or at least in a way that can like help them get involved in the industry. Um, I mean, some states, some cities take like a proactive approach. Like you might be familiar with like social equity programs. In some of those programs, they give preference to veterans. I know in California, I believe that's the case as well. Like if you are a veteran and you're like applying for a license, you can get like priority processing. So that's one thing. I mean, I know a lot of businesses, also through my friend Eric, who I referenced earlier, they do this thing that's called like the SB34 supply drop. It's a SB34 is like a Senate bill, that I don't know like the exact intricacies of it, but like the summary is that they are able to give, um, product that like is close to expiring, they're able
Mm-hmm.
to give it to veterans for free through these like
Wow.
organized events. So they don't happen like all the time. And I'm actually not sure when the last one happened. I usually hear of it through Eric. But yeah, they'll work with like a local dispensary, and they will coordinate it so that like the dispensary's product or like another company, like be it a grower or a distributor, will like funnel their expiring product into the dispensary um, for this event where veterans, usually like patients who are like card carrying patient, like medical recommendation, who are also veterans, will be able to verify their status and then participate in this event where they'll get like the maximum allowed allotment, usually for like pennies, if not for free. So in
Nice.
Well, actually, if they're patients, they have a much higher limit. For adult use customers in California, you're allowed 1 ounce of flour or 8 grams of concentrate, or rather, and 8 grams of concentrate. You can have both. But for a patient, it's like it's like half a pound or something like that. I don't remember exactly. It's a much higher.
Wow.
I think it's like 8 ounces of flour or something like that. So much more. And yeah, veterans are able to uh, get that product basically for free. So that's definitely a good way to do it. But I think like, probably, I mean, all of these kind of speak towards that thing. We want to be able to support veterans through like, good paying jobs, which the industry can definitely provide, be it through gainful employment opportunities or through business ownership opportunities. And then just as important is like uh, the medical aspect of it, which we just described in terms of those like product drops, but also, you know, ideally advocating for change on a federal level so that like the VA and whoever the
No
hell
doubt.
can actually talk to their patients about it. But actually, now that I'm remembering, you mentioned the doctor was like not willing to, or not even willing to talk to you about it, was saying that he only has like sources that are, or studies that show that it's bad. One of the reasons that is because cannabis is Schedule 1, and so as a Schedule 1 drug, it has no accepted medical value. So they like, I don't know if it's legally, but like I guess legally they can't actually study it for
Public. Right.
medical benefits, because Schedule 1 says it does not have medical benefits. They can churn out studies that
Correct.
say it doesn't have medical benefits, but once it says the opposite, it's like not technically
It.
legal to do so.
Co- correct. Correct. And that's the problem that we face now, man. I want to. I want this plant research, man. Like we
Yeah.
researched everything else, and if there is research to back the study of scheduling one, then we want to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then we want to have a dialogue about the studies you said, not just you tell us that it's bad. I,
Right. Yeah.
you know,
Agreed.
that's been the whole thing from since I was little. Is I've always heard that this is a bad drug and that it's a gateway drug and you
Right.
shouldn't smoke it, you shouldn't use it. But I've been using it for quite some time, and I think I'm still pretty successful, and it's never made me want to go out and smoke a big crack rock. So, you know,
Agreed. Same.
we gotta, I don't know. And I'm so new to the industry, but I don't even know steps that I can take in order to start advocating more for some type of change. And then I don't even know what is the change that we want. Do we want
Right.
it descheduled or do we
Yeah.
want it to be able just to grow freely,
Yeah.
or
And
use freely?
that depends on who you ask. Like some people are big advocates of home grow. Some businesses don't want that. Some businesses, are lobbying state legislatures or federal, representatives so that like people can't have home grow, because then at like monopolizes their ability to like grow the plant themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, again, it depends on who you talk to, what their priorities would be in terms of legalization and commodification of it. Some people want to see it as like a pharmaceutical type substance. Like you were saying before with like pharmacists in the dispensaries, like people like that, not them specifically, but like a pharmaceutical company is what
Right.
I'm getting at. Like they obviously want to be able to, again, commodify it and like profit off of it. It's a bit different because it's a plant and like a flower, not what pharmaceuticals usually are. Um, so yeah,
Right.
I mean, and then there's people that just don't want it legal at all. There's not many of them,
Right.
but there are people that just
They
think
feel like
it's
there's no medicinal use.
exactly,
Yeah.
and a lot of them are, federal representatives in like Congress. It's kind of crazy.
The old guard, because I
Yeah,
don't see any new people, younger generation advocating against cannabis. I just don't see it. You know.
yeah, and if they do,
So
it's not something that people take seriously either. Like, because like you were
right.
saying, like you've used it your whole life, like anecdotally how it like affects you and affects the people around you, your friends and family. But I don't know. Sorry, 1 second.
No, no
It's
worries.
just it's crazy to hear someone say that there's no benefit to it. Like, you know, I didn't go to Oaksterdam, but I did a similar like school in Massachusetts back in like 2012, 2013. Similar style as Oaksterdam. And yeah, I mean, there are studies, like there's countless people that cannabis has impacted for the better from like a medicinal point of view. So when you hear that, it's just like that's not the case.
And and how long has cannabis been Schedule One? Maybe over 70 years now, right?
Something like that. I mean, it's been illegal federally since I think it's like 1934, so like almost 100 years. And then
Right. So
scheduling came in a few years later. I think it was like Nixon that did it. But yeah, Schedule One
so
ever
this is
since
my
the
thing.
schedule started.
This is my thing. Remember back in the day when biological testing for crime scenes wasn't even a thing,
Hmm.
right? But then we've been able to break down genetics and prove that you're that person, right?
Hmm.
Well, the evolution of the work changed and we've come up with a new outcome. Like, I don't see anyone giving cannabis some of the new advanced tools that we have. Because
Yeah.
if we can put our minds together to extract the plant, I feel
Hmm.
like we can create a machine that will show medicinal values of the plant. It just hasn't gotten its chance, to be studied. And then makes you
Yeah.
think, why?
Totally.
Well, why has it been illegal and scheduled with no medicinal value since almost 100 years with no one to give it a shot and see
Right.
about it? Because the use of cannabis didn't stop.
Right.
You know, people aren't dropping dead from using cannabis. So again, it makes me want to be like, all right, well, I want to go see why people can't stop using cannabis and they're not dropping dead like fentanyl. It's just weird.
Yeah. No, that's it's an interesting point. And it's something I would always think about too. Like even, for sure still do think about, but I'm not saying I know the answer or anything, but it kind of seems like it's just gotten, or at a certain point, it just got to a point that people were like, it's illegal because it's illegal. Like there's no,
Right,
there's no like origin to like, oh, it's bad. Like it's more like, oh, I heard it's bad and I know it's illegal. So that means it's bad and illegal.
right,
Like there's not really
right.
any critical thinking going on there. And I think that's kind of the case, like, for the last few decades with it. And I think there are still people like that to this day. again, I think it's like they're not as many of them as there used to be. But yeah, I just feel like it comes from like ignorance, I guess, like just not knowing any better and just kind of going with what they're told.
Thanks. So, what do you see the future of cannabis business in the next 5 years, and any advice for someone looking to break into the business of cannabis?
Yeah, the next 5 years is definitely going to be interesting. So most recently, I mean, the most positive news, I guess, is that uh, like there are two things that happen on like the federal level where safe banking, which is a uh, bill, I guess, that's moving through the Senate. Other versions have gone through the House. It recently got like first round approval. What this would allow for is cannabis businesses to like use banks like across the board, um, as opposed to what we were describing earlier. Um, so that, I mean, it's good news, but it still like has several ways to go. It still needs to be approved by the whole Senate and then by the whole House of Representatives, and then needs to be passed by like the president. So that is something that could happen. um, I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are optimistic that it will, but it could take, if it does happen, it could take like another year or 2 years or even longer. It's been something that's
Right.
been in the works for a very long time now already. And then the other good news that happened was the Department of Health and Human Services, another federal agency. They made like a formal recommendation to the DEA to reschedule cannabis from
Drop it.
Schedule
Yep.
1 to Schedule 3. Um, Again, that's something that if it happens, it could take another year or two or longer. Um, do I think that those things are going to happen within the next 5 years? I think yes, we'll see something on both of them. I don't think it necessarily is going to happen immediately. Um, and I don't think it's necessarily going to happen smoothly either. Like the DEA could respond to the Department of Health and Human Services, their recommendation to reschedule it, and DEA could just say like no, like they don't have to say
Right.
yes. They could just say no, and then uh, we'd kind of be back at square one with that. But the good thing is that like it's a conversation that's happening. So I do think that we will see some progress in the next 5 years. If I was being optimistic, I would say, some level of legalization. Um, but I don't know, kind of like we were just describing before, like the status quo in terms of weed has really influenced like legality for like so long now. Like I was saying, like it's
Mm-hmm.
illegal because it's illegal. It's bad because it's illegal. Like, there's no sense to it. I could definitely see it taking longer still. But I don't know. We're kind of at a point like I think maybe, you know, I think a lot of it will depend on who's president next. Um, be it Biden or a Republican or maybe even another Democrat. Like, who knows? Um,
Right.
I'm sure. I
What
know
would you like to see?
I would love it to be legal. I would love it to be descheduled and not even scheduled. I mean, I get that it's like, it's a powerful plant that can like have a lot of different uses, but like Schedule 3 is stricter than like Xanax and like
Right.
uh Klonopin, I think. I think Klonopin and Xanax are both like Schedule 4. The lowest schedule is Schedule 5. And so cannabis
Wow.
currently at the highest schedule, Schedule 1, if it's brought down to
It's like
Schedule 3, I mean, it'd be better, but it's still like it's not legal like it should be, or free. I mean, I think you said
right.
earlier like plants should just be growing in the field, like it shouldn't be so
Right.
strict.
It shouldn't be so tight.
But in terms
Um,
of like breaking into the industry in the next 5 years, I kind of think that like kind of cheesy, but it's like there's no better time than now. If you're looking to break
Mm-hmm.
into it, I mean, just break into it whenever you think you're ready to, and in whatever way that you're able to do so. I mean, even that means different things for different people. Like, you know, with some of the businesses that I've like consulted with, these guys are like, you know, millionaires, and they've never been involved in the industry, and they don't even like smoke weed. They may have like never even done so in their entire lives, and they're deciding to break into the industry, be it through like investing in a business or something like that, or
Mm-hmm.
operating their own business. So, I mean, if you're looking to start a business or you're looking to get a job at a cannabis business, if it's the right time for you, just go for it. I mean, there's only going to be more
For sure.
opportunities as time goes on. I'm not. There's some people that are like skeptical of the future, where they think that like if weed gets more legal, it gets more inaccessible.
That's what I want
Like,
to talk about.
yeah, like some people think that like, you know, if it's rescheduled, then it's a bad thing because like only certain businesses will be able to do it and only pharmacies will be able to sell weed, or you know, you
Cultivate.
can yeah, you can only buy weed for like $100 a gram, like, and it's dirt. Like, I don't think that's realistic in terms of like the future for weed. It's not what the past was like. It's not what the present is like. It's certainly not what the future is going to be like. You know, like a way that I've said it to people is like, you know, weed is currently Schedule 1, which is as illegal
Mm-hmm.
as it can be. Like they can't,
It is
like,
fire.
yeah, they can't make it more illegal. Like they've been trying to do that for a while. I don't think weed's gonna like go away or become like harder to access. I think it's just gonna get better. Um, but you know, there is certainly something to say in terms of like the business of weed. Um, it's gonna get more competitive for sure. Um, which can be good or bad. You know, means you gotta be smarter and work harder, get more creative. But one thing I'll say is that I would like to think that as the business, as the laws, as like the plant in general gets more and more normalized, I would like to think
Mm-hmm.
that more normal people are going to get involved in weed, because a lot of these business owners, like I was just describing to you, like there's people that like are millionaires. They've never smoked weed or anything. Like they're not always good people. They don't really treat their employees well. They don't pay them well, you
Wow.
know, because it's still in a lot of people's mind like, oh, the wild west of weed. They kind of think they can just
Right.
do whatever they want, um, which usually means like, you
Wow.
know, profiting for themselves. Um, yeah, I would like to think that in the future there's going to be less of that, but maybe that might be a little too optimistic. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, with the prices, what with the prices of entering into the cannabis industry being astronomical,
Mm-hmm.
I can only see that those type of people or individuals will continue to dominate the playing field
Yeah.
because you're making it to where passion won't get it. You
Right.
got to have capital. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So that's why I want to be cautious about those like optimistic statements, because yeah, until things just become more normal, like yeah, it's gonna be designed for that, designed for those people to benefit those people. Unfortunately, um, but I don't know. I mean, you know, at the same time, you got to think like one way is like you view it on like a personal scale too. Like I know people that, and I've been hearing of people that like are getting into home grow for their first time, and they are loving it, and they're just investing more into it. Like, you know, they're growing their own weed, making their own rosin, and then they realize like, oh, not only was that like not hard, but it was fun, and like it's cheaper than if I'm like going to the store. I don't need to
No, for sure.
if I'm just growing for myself, like I don't need to like operate this, get millions of dollars in investment or whatever. So I don't know. I think there is
Right.
some hope, but I think your point is very important in that it's going to continue to be dominated by these big players for the time being.
I just say free the plant, man.
Amen.
That's the only law I want. Whatever law that is, just free it, so I can
Amen.
grow it freely and it can continue producing
I
top quality
completely
medicine.
agree. That should be ultimately, what's if you're into cannabis, that should be your main thing. Is like the plant should be free.
For sure, for sure. All right, man. Well, we're coming up on 30 minutes, brother, and that was an amazing show, bro. I learned a lot. I appreciate it. I'm pretty sure the guests are gonna do it, and we got to do
Hell
it
yeah.
again.
I would love to,
All
man.
right, brother.
Anytime.
Well, for sure, man. Man, you know what I wanted to know? I wanted to know a success story of you consulting a business, though.
Yeah, I mean my biggest success was in 2018 with well no, technically I guess that was my biggest success, but there's a new one on the horizon that could be even bigger
Okay,
success. But I'll at least talk about the
nice.
2018 one. I was working with a consulting firm. Um, I started with them in 2017. We got a client in 2018 and did a dispensary license application in Santa Barbara. We won that. It was like super competitive. We went against like a bunch of companies in California. We won, and it was a really cool period. I mean, it was the first, or no, it was the second dispensary in that city. It was in the dispensary itself opened in 2019, so uh, it was it was on the earlier side of like the adult use market in California. So it was really exciting to be a part of this like big dispensary opening. That group
No
ended up
doubt.
um, that group ended up selling their business for like $30 million, which is like crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wasn't part of that acquisition or anything, so I didn't get any of that. But it's cool to at least know that, like, through the work that I did, this business became like this
No, for sure.
massively successful business. And like, I wouldn't say I'm on the best terms with those people. They kind of, let me go, which was
Of
unfortunate.
course.
But it was cool to at least be a part of it, And
No, for sure.
I mentioned a similar business opportunity will be opening. We to backtrack, we similarly won a license back in 2021. Um, Similar market up in
Nice.
Santa Barbara, and that dispensary will be opening next year. I am more intimately involved with that one now, so that is
Nice.
exciting. So we'll see. I mean, the future hopefully will have bigger successes for all of us, man. Um, I
For sure.
really appreciate you inviting me on here. I wish you nothing but success, nothing but the best. And yeah,
Man,
thank you, man. I appreciate it.
man, Ben, I really appreciate it, man. I know you took time out your busy day, and I'm excited for the opening next year, man. My man, I definitely
I'll
want to
keep
be
you in the
there,
loop
man,
about it.
and
Yeah, I would love that.
clap for you, man. Like no bullshit, clap for you. So, um, again, thanks for being on the show.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, anytime, anytime. And I'll let you know about future episodes with like Dabby Hour and other podcast opportunities. We'll definitely keep working together, man.
No doubt, man. I appreciate it, brother.
All right, man. Have a good one, man.
We're out.
Peace. Thank you.